Welcome to Withum Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
Welcome to Take Me to the Cloud. I'm Kim Gordon, and I'm here with my colleagues Walter Merkas and Joe Riccie.
Hi, everyone. This is Joe. Hey, thanks for coming in and listening today. We're pretty excited to share, some of our experience and knowledge on this topic. This group here is in our Withum advisory practice, and we focus on helping companies basically solve problems. But specifically, we're going to talk about solving those problems with a Take Me to a Cloud series.
Thanks, Joe. This podcast is going to occur on a monthly basis for around 30 minutes each. Take it away, Wally.
Sure. So as we look at sort of the topics and areas, it's going to be important for us to look at what types of topics we're going to discuss. And it's important to start with a definition of the cloud. And, Joe, you and I will banter back and forth, and Kim will have this whole discussion around what the definition of cloud. And it means many things to many people. For some, it simply means a place where we can store our software or access our software. Hey, Joe, you were talking about an op model before. Can you just run through that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, the way I've seen it with our clients is the cloud is basically an operating model. It's a mindset, okay? It's a different way to run your company. And when you think about it, yes, there's a lot of research out there about the cost effectiveness. I don't think there's any deniability about that. It can be 30 to 60% based on research reports I've read in the last couple of years in terms of cost efficiency. But that just sets the table, right? To us, now operating in the cloud, right? There are 4 pillars, right, that I see that are really important. And even more so today, and how we're all rethinking how business has to get done in the lockdown world. And those pillars are: I need to work remote. Okay. I still need to collaborate with my colleagues, with my clients, with my suppliers, my vendors, right? I still need to be secure. I think cybersecurity is on steroids here when you're working in the cloud, clearly because how much money the software companies spend on security compared to you in your own companies. It really pales in comparison. And the last pillar here is productivity, right? So I really started about the cost efficiency, but again, productivity, as I'm working in the cloud, helps me to think about 2 words. Those 2 words are modernization and innovation. So in case you're taking notes, I'll go through those pillars one more time. Remote, secure, collaborate, and productivity. And all of that should help us lead towards modernization and innovation. I think, Wally, that's what you and I were talking about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Traditionally, Kim and I are working on a CRM engagement right now where this customer is using modern tools and modern solutions, but they're really not getting the benefits of the cloud. And we're trying to work through a couple of the things and a couple of the ways that we're going to help this customer, which is really the topic of today. But before we get to there, talking a little bit more about the benefits. And to me, when I'm in there working, and Kim, if you think of this particular customer, it's the speed and time to market to value. And I think that is one of the biggest things. Traditionally in the old days, you would have had to go through, get your servers up and running, get the software loaded, etc. And now it's simply you're up and running, and now you're starting to configure in a very short period of time. So Kim, I don't know what you think about this CRM project we're on. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the questions and the way you went about that exercise of assessing for the CRM.
Sure, Wally. Essentially, this project actually initially started as a ERP implementation. So we're focusing on AR, AP, GL inventory. And then this eventually evolved to realizing that they need more of the CRM piece to add on to it. So they needed a more holistic approach to their business, because what they were doing, they were still operating in their ERP system, but still tracking their sales activities on the side. And that was a huge part of their business that they needed streamlined in order to make a better customer experience for them on the front lines and not just the back office operations. So one of the benefits that they were looking for is not only how can we just translate this Excel spreadsheet into an ERP exactly the same way they structured it, but also how to optimize each and every piece of the process, how they look at data, how they think about data. They need to restructure their whole sales model now. So a CRM or any other implementation or assessment has to keep in mind not where they are right now, but also where they need to be in the future.
Really like that. I like the way you went about that because I think that's exactly right. When we walked in the door with this particular client, what we noticed is that there wasn't really a cloud strategy. And it was more of a, we would like access, we would like to have new software, we would like to modernize their solutions, but we don't know where we're going. And some of what you just talked about, I think, is very relevant. Working on getting yourselves ready as an organization, defining what readiness is. So we here at Withum will do a lot of spend a lot of time in that cloud readiness time, and we're spending a lot of time defining your strategy. We believe that all of these things are much a people problem and a people issue more than it is a technology problem. You know, Joe, you and I talk about this a fair amount as we banter back and forth on our on the practice and where we're going with the practice. A lot of times we're not solving, or we are solving for technology, but most of the time we're dealing with people and people challenges and things like that. Could you just give a brief talk about a brief sort of note around change and how companies think about organizational readiness?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, quite frankly. People is that dynamic, right? Where there's no secret sauce and everybody, you know, our life is great. We get to meet so many different people and learn about how people learn and their styles, okay? And if I think about the benefits, Wally, talent, right? We've always said in our practice that talent wins the day. If you have the right talent working with you, you can figure out almost any problem. Okay. And so with the cloud, right? If you think about today, you might be constrained with your talent. Now you might be shaking your head and say, hey, look, you know, there are many people unemployed. True, right? But the cloud technology has been an evolution. How many folks, professionals, have really kept up with the evolution, right? With their skills. Now, we know the universities that we hire from, you know, have great programs in place to teach younger professionals cloud software and technology, right? Though, what about your own companies? What have you done really to elevate people? All right, because they're talent. There's a reason they're still with you today. So, from a change management perspective, learning and development is the first key aspect that I'll talk about there, right? And so, as we think about moving to the cloud, we got to think about our people, okay? They're going to go through a transformation. For some, it's going to be okay. For some, they're going to struggle, and some they're going to say, absolutely not, okay? And so that change management program on learning and development really needs to pay attention to that. But again, bringing this all back to Wally's point, this is more of a people problem, right, to solve for. And luckily for us, we've had that success in our change management, and I call it really user adoption, because that's what it's meant to be, to help companies get the benefits of going to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what you were referring to, Wally.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think, you know, as we start to complete our assessments and our cloud readiness, you know, I look at sort of what the business case and what the benefits are, because you still have to consider that. So a lot of times people might be trying to modernize for the right or for the wrong reasons, and they're under-resourcing some of these projects so that they're not thinking of the people side of these projects. Very important to make sure that if you're going to the cloud, that you understand, first of all, what you're going to go to the cloud with, how much of that software you're going to go to the cloud with and where you're going to be ready. And is your organization ready? Are you ready to embark on that cloud transformation, digital proof of concept, use case, whatever it is that you're trying to solve for as you go through your journey to the cloud? Kim, we talked a little bit about approaches and how we might adopt cloud. Joe talked a little bit about change. Project management is a significant aspect here as you go through some of these things. And I know you and I have been on a few projects here where you're managing those projects. Could you just talk a little bit about some of the things that you're finding when we go through these projects that are relevant to going to the cloud?
Sure. Thanks, Wally. So essentially, when people first view an implementation project, they're thinking it's purely technology. And to Wally and Joe's point, there is a huge people element that sometimes is the biggest risk in making sure you have a successful deployment as well as a successful operational future in operating this. So there needs to be internal ownership by the company adopting the technology, and then during the project, both sides, whoever is helping you implement it and the company itself, need to unite from the project management perspective to make sure that to mitigate all the people risk involved as well as other risks. So, for example, if you have a client that is tackling on all these customizations, it's not just utilizing native functionality. You might need a whole PM team to manage on both sides to manage the entire project. So it's also PM is seen as almost dispensable in a way, but that's a misconception because that guarantees how the change management is going to be effectively deployed in the future, and it can't be underestimated. So it could either be a team, it could be two individuals, but that's how you manage the project and beyond itself.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that a lot. If we were to think about how we're assessing and how we look at cloud readiness when we go in, the first thing we look at is sort of the cloud adoption area. And then we look at the benefits and make sure the business case is there. Cybersecurity, which Joe alluded to earlier. And then also the physical security and disaster resiliency is very important. How quickly, if you go down, can you get your information? We're shocked when we walk into some places and they haven't thought through resiliency because the cloud company says, oh, we take care of disaster recovery. Well, we've got it all. And then no one's actually done a disaster recovery test. And if something were to go down, they haven't actually validated and done it. Now, traditionally, a lot of companies spend a lot of time on disaster recovery and figuring out what that organization's like. So for us, when we tie all those things together, we call that a maturity, and we really rank companies in a maturity model so that we can understand and help them deal with the risks and build a roadmap for them for cloud adoption. Hey, Joe, I'm just thinking about when we build out our statement of work, and we always put the objectives of a project in the statement of work. And sometimes what happens is you get halfway through a project, and sometimes you get lost in the detail. And we always seem to want to go back to those objectives of the project. I think your interpretation of this is really, really excellent. And I thought maybe you could just speak a little bit to why objectives are so important in a project.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves, right? Because we represent ourselves to people that we work with to be very practical business people, right? While you've owned your own company, I've worked in private industry for many years before I came into public consulting. And I think it really matters to have a practicality mindset, right? And, there are sometimes we even told our clients, don't spend the money. And they take a step back or raise their eyebrows and say, well, wait a minute, you don't want work? No, we want to do the right work, right? And the right work is to say, what are we here to solve? Okay. Now, I know this might sound to you in the audience to be very basic, but some folks that we've met who want to take me to the cloud, their thought process is, and you might have heard this phrase in the industry called rip and replace. Now, that's a management decision, but I don't think they avail themselves of modernization. Now, wait a minute. So I said modernization, and so is Wally, maybe 5-6 times. So let me help put this together. Modernization for us, right, is being able to work remote, be secure about it, still collaborate, and gain efficiencies through productivity. That's modernization. Okay. And therefore, when I look at objectives, we really want them to be tangible. What is it that we're going to change, right? And why? So, it could be the business plan, it could be a vision, right? And sometimes it's just not a complete software implementation. It might just be a piece inside the software that you want to change, right? So don't think this is really big and it's not meant for you. No, it can be. It might just be a process change. Here, we're just talking about, using the efficiencies of cloud, but those objectives really are going to also be used for change management, because any leader that we work with would say to me, Joe, why am I spending this money? What's my ROI? And maybe you might think, well, there is no ROI in technology. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes, to be more modern and operate is a necessity with you and your customers, right? But those objectives, if they're outlined carefully and with some tangible targets, we've used those on projects as we go through a project, and even stop the project to say, well, wait a minute, how are we going to get to this key metric? And we might have to rethink the strategy. Okay, so that's why, to us, what are we all working towards? It's just not about putting in a new ERP or a new CRM. We have to get something back from it.
To build on that, Joe, that's why we go in initially and try to seek first to understand what the company is doing, how they specifically have their operating model, and we perform an assessment and observe what they're doing day to day in order to determine what the next steps are and if you really need to get to that point. Or is it just something, little optimizations for what they already have? So there's flexibility with different solutions with what you have today, depending upon what your business needs are.
You're right, Kim. I'm sorry, Wally, but you're right. I'll use the Wally phrase here, the sequence of events, right? In terms of, no, if someone's listening, these folks are talking about spending lots of money. No, that's not the case. Okay, sometimes it is, but we much rather have a sequence of events. Wally, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the sequence of events, depending on what you're trying to get to, so if we tighten this up, we've got a company that we work with, say, just specifically on a revenue engagement. And so for them, it's more of these would be the necessary things you need to do to count your revenue. For other companies, they're actually looking for their first foray into the cloud. And so in that instance, some of our options for them would be, these are the 3 cloud solutions essentially that would work for you. The sequence of events ties that together. It really is the secret sauce of the assessment. And the sequence of events is essentially what comes first, what comes second. This really is alignment. This really is about people. It has nothing to do with technology or software. It's almost a ruse. And in fact, when you look at our deliverables, they're very rudimentary. They're very simple bar graphs. You put this first, this goes second, this goes next. And we believe that is the right way to go about doing it, so that you can get your people aligned with what is first, what is second, what is third, and then move towards sort of being successful with those types of cloud transformations or digital transformations. Very good.
Yeah.
I just want to pick up one more thing on the assessment, and I think all of this is really about the assessment. So maybe what we could do is move through, what we see, and I'll just sort of throw a few things around here. But, typically for the assessments, you're coming in and you're either looking holistically at your IT, you're looking at ways to innovate, ways to make, build out your first digital use case. Maybe you're thinking of machine learning or beyond what we're talking about here on Take Me to the Cloud. You're thinking about these things and you're not sure how to innovate and get there. Or you're thinking just simply about, operational excellence and how you can move through a journey to get to where you need to be. Hey, Kim, what we are doing, the revenue engagement that we're currently on, we're doing sort of a 2-day diagnostic, if you will, if I could use that. It's a very specific one. But as you think through what that assessment, like the current state, future state, and then sort of how we're going to do it, maybe just talk a little bit about what we did as we're going through now, the analysis part, et cetera, just a little bit.
Sure. So essentially, a client came to us. They already had in mind specifically what they wanted to hone in on. So this is not a holistic request saying, hey, we want to figure out what's going on in each of our different departments and operations. They were very specific on their revenue. They wanted to streamline their billing as they bill same day. So it's very important to optimize their customer service as they keep scaling, because to keep up with the load of billing, um, it was becoming a little burdensome for them. So essentially, our process for the 2-day diagnostic was to really focus in on that key factor, as well as any surrounding issues or operations that affected that. So people, process, technology, data, as well as whatever hands touched that process. And that includes sitting down in an overall boardroom, understanding from key executives, business owners, doing one-on-one interviews, process mapping. And you'll find at the end of all these different interviews with different levels and departments, everyone has a different perspective of what the ultimate process is. And between this department, that department, somewhere between there is the right answer. And then we're trying to bridge the gaps between the company's understanding as well as our own to
Like it.
optimize. Yep.
Like it. And, we affectionately here call it, customer journey. Joe and I often talk a little bit about the customer journey and how that works. The customer journey to me is a well known in the marketing world, but in the technology world, we usually say fit gap analysis, and we're going to go in and do an analysis, and we're going to ultimately get to where you are. We love using the customer journey model because it allows us to sort of identify the interactions between both a function. So imagine we could look at the interactions in a finance department, and then we could look at the interactions of that finance department outward, both to operations, internal. So these internal customers are there, and then also the external customers. And so by focusing on the interactions and the little pieces of their day-to-day, a day in the life of anyone's role, you're able to quickly and easily identify where they are going to be, need extra help, need more software, need more people. And so to Kim's point earlier, full process technology and data, you're able to identify all of those key areas and look at the interactions within those. Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything to the customer journey, but it is something we use as a technique for our technology assessment practice.
Yeah, just 2 seconds on bragging rights here. Wally coined that phrase, right? Some 5 years ago, and it's been so relevant with our clients, because at the end of the day, when all of our customers are satisfied or more than satisfied, don't all good things come from happy customers? Of course they do, right? All good things come from happy customers. So my internal customers, those are your employees, right? If they're happy with using tools that make their life better, right, and getting their job done and rethinking how they can get their job done differently, they're going to be happy. And then our external customers, they're going to be happy with the whole experience, right? In terms of how you've served them. So that's part of our success. When we focus on that customer journey and what Kim talked about early and how we do that in our workshops, we have revealed a lot for organizations. And in our mindset, even though you haven't engaged us for change management, we are already thinking about change management and user adoption when we do that customer journey process, just to see who's ready, who needs more help, who needs less help. So that's why it's vitally important, the customer journey approach.
And to build off of that, I find often when customers come and say, "Hey, we just want you to take a look under the hood. This is what we think is wrong, and we just want confirmation so we know next steps." It's almost like they're seeking a validation. And then often what we find, there's some underlying issues they haven't even considered. So a big part of that is um, revealing information that wasn't even on their radar for anyone. So that's the most important part of change management is because they're prepared to hear what they told us but they're not prepared necessarily to hear what they didn't tell us.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
love that. The share voice of the organization, and you flatten the hierarchy when you do this exercise. And I think it's very important that you do that so that the people that are actually doing the work have that biggest voice in those meetings. We look at all this so that we use this technique, but ultimately what this is getting us to is a cloud readiness, a digital maturity, whatever way you want to look at maturity. What we're looking at is, if Kim and I are in looking at folks when we were, pre-pandemic in offices, do your people have two monitors? How do they use Excel? Are they advanced users, low-level users? So we're really looking at people from that way and trying to assess as an organization your maturity levels and go through and work to sort of gain what applications will be right for you and what approach. This all ties back to the sequence of events. So if we have a low tech company, and no disrespect to any company that is in that, there are a lot that are in that space. We can't very well offer you the most advanced solution, and you should be putting in machine learning and AI right off the hop. So what we do is we always try to blend with your realistic goals, your investment choices that you're planning to make, and then blend that in with your maturity model, so that ultimately we end up, to Joe's point earlier about the cloud, an op model that will make the most sense for you as an organization. And I think my point is not to say more about how Withum does it. My point is to say, if we never chat again, make sure you're thinking through your organization more holistically. We find companies go in and do these assessments in silo. The finance team will do a finance assessment. The inventory and ops team will do an inventory and ops assessment. And then they're not even talking to each other. Meanwhile, we all know that inventory ends up on the balance sheet. And when we procure inventory, it goes through a whole financial function as well as an ops function. And so these are entirely interconnected and interrelated processes, just as one example. But very important as you go through this exercise that you think these things through as you get to an approach of your digital maturity and your cloud readiness piece.
And I think if companies are also ready to take the next step, it's important to realize that when you are looking for a certain type of assessment, make sure it's not one that they're trying to conform a solution upon you, but trying to figure out what solution works best for you. Because there's two different very approaches. So that's important why it's very important to filter that criteria when you're selecting which vendor is best suited for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. So we've talked a little bit about our assessments and how we go about doing them without detail. And we're going to have future podcasts that are going to be specific about the tools, et cetera, that we use. So we've really walked through, we do assessments, we do evaluations on software and risk assessments, et cetera. As we go into sort of other services that are involved in going to the cloud, you may choose to outsource. And so it's not uncommon to have business process outsourcing and a whole model that changes the game. Joe, you're very familiar with this area, and maybe you could just spend a little bit of time for those of the folks on this podcast that might be interested in outsourced models.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to talent, right? And remember, when Wally started this conversation today on the podcast, we said this was a people challenge, not software and technology, right? Now, so when we get to meet with other companies, okay, and we're looking at talent and we're looking to understand efficiencies, learning and development, right? Consumption of new processes, and modernization, innovation with the return on investment, right? So that was a lot, Joe. But when you put all that together, some companies have said, I don't think we're ever going to get there. Okay. And another reason we like the cloud is because the talent that exists in other places in the United States, okay, at software companies in terms of technology, right? The caring and feeding, there's still a server, okay? There's still a server someplace. And I still need a chief information security officer, okay, to make sure I'm secure. And if you think about how much money you spend on that today, right? That talent is being consumed by the larger software companies and by business process outsourcing companies, okay? So now you're scrambling or scratching your head to find that talent. And, we want to get those benefits. So to me, there is a path where you could transition yourself into a business process service model. Okay. Now, I didn't call it outsource for a reason. Okay. Because there are occasions where what we call is rebadge companies' employees. Okay. And we put them in a center under Withum's Business Process Services to support your account, right? But also other customers. Now your cost to serve your company has been lowered. You still have people who understand you, right? And in our Business Process Service Center, now we're kind of high tech here. Okay, I'm pretty proud of this because now we have other tools that help the financial close. Okay, that monitor it very precisely for people to do their jobs. If we're going to process your accounts payable or collect your money on your invoices, now we have robotic process automation. So we have that software in our center. So now that's going to take the redundancy of that task away from a person, because now we want to use that person to do analysis. So my point here about business process services, we use more tools in that center that you might not be willing to invest in right now. And that all goes back to what? The productivity part in modernization. Okay. I mean, there's also intelligent process automation. So while I mentioned machine learning, right? And then we have artificial intelligence applications, right? So this can become very, very sophisticated. So you do have a path. So we just don't want people to still sit on the sidelines and don't do anything today, because we really believe you have to rethink how you're going to get your business done in the world we operate. Maybe that's a little bit longer than you wanted, Wally, but I just wanted to draw the comparison of other tools in our center.
No, I like it. I like it because I think, as we look at subsequent podcasts, we're going to talk about products. We're going to talk about, more detail around the assessments. And we'll even get back to talking more about business process services that companies can offer and help people get to the cloud quicker. So a lot of times that investment in people, which we've been really, honing in on today, is very important. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim. This has been a great first podcast, Kim and Joe. I think it's good to have a banter around the types of things, the types of approaches. But I'm going to throw it back over to Kim to close us out for this first session. And thank you all for listening in.
Sure. Thanks for listening to us. If you are interested in hearing a topic that we haven't covered, you can email us. There's going to be links in the description. And you can visit our website, withum.com, to learn more about our services as well as the rest of our firm. You may find a holistic solution for you. That's all for now. Thanks, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at withum.com. That's WITHUM.com.